Hello everyone, Jay Warden here with my recap and review of The Battle, which is definitely the best episode of the season so far, though compared to what we've had to sit through so far, that's not really that hard. Remember those spoilers and otherwise, enjoy. The Enterprise has rendezvoused with a Ferengi ship which wants to have a meeting with them. Though they turned up as requested, they've been rudely ignoring them now for 3 days, which seems to be giving Picard a headache. Dr. Beverly takes a look but can't really find anything wrong, so tells him to report to sickbay for a checkup. He doesn't really want to go, but is thankfully saved by Riker, who informs him that the Ferengi are finally willing to answer their calls. On the bridge, we're introduced to Damon Bok, who, unlike the last Ferengi we encountered, is thankfully not doing any extreme close-ups. He says he wants to discuss a mutual problem but wants to meet in person. Troy briefly cuts off the call because she senses great deception coming from him.
Betazoids cannot read Ferengis.
So Riker suggests that they control the situation by having them beamed to the Enterprise. Bok agrees and hopes it will begin a new era of friendship and says that he'll see them in an hour, but everyone on the bridge remains suspicious. While they wait, Dr. Beverly examines Picard but still can't find anything wrong with him despite his continuing headache, so gives him some painkillers and sends him on his way. Wesley then arrives on the bridge to report an old Federation ship is approaching them and proceeds to immediately irritate us all by making the adults look bad at their jobs because he figured it out whilst just playing with the sensors. This makes Picard's headache worse, so it gives him a good bollocking for being an irritating little shit. Data then alarm clocks Picard that it's time for the meeting, so they stand to attention while Bok beams over with his first officer Kazargo and some other aide who I couldn't give a fuck about. After oogling Troy and making an offer on purchasing Data, Bok proceeds to explain the approaching starship is under his control and that they want to offer it as a gift in honour for something called the Battle of Maxia. Picard has no idea what he's talking about, and Data has to remind him of that time he blew up an unknown ship that attacked his old ship 9 years ago. Apparently that unknown ship was a Ferengi ship, and Picard explains that, well, it attacked first with no warning and he was simply defending himself. Bok is all cool and innocent and just says, well, you know, mistakes happen. As the approaching ship enters visual range, Bok offers it to Picard for free, alarming his crewmates as that's a rather un-Ferengi-like behaviour. Picard is suspicious and it makes his headache even worse, which even Troy ends up feeling. He composes himself and asks Bok what the fuck this is all about, and Bok just says, well, just look a bit closer at the ship and you'll see why. Zooming the TV in, he realises that it's his old ship, the USS Stargazer, and demands to know how they found it. Bok claims it was just adrift in space nearby and that how it got there is really none of his concern, only that he wants to give it back to Picard as an act of friendship, further upsetting his crewmates about the lack of profits, whilst Riker and Troy look suspiciously at each other. With the gift accepted, Dr. Beverly takes another quick look at Picard but still can't find out what's wrong with him, so with nothing useful being figured out here, Picard calls a conference and explains to everyone what happened on that fateful day with the Stargazer. During the explanation, he briefly starts talking to someone else who's not in the room but realises he's getting rather caught up in the tale. He gets back on track and explains how after initially being crippled, he managed to defeat the Ferengi ship by taking the helm personally and performing what is now known as the Picard maneuver. No, not that one. Picard tells Riker that he wants to beam over and have a look at the old girl, and Riker says, well, that's fine, but let me just take a look first to make sure it's safe. On board the Stargazer's bridge, which looks suspiciously familiar, the crew examine the ship and give Picard the all clear, so he beams aboard with Dr. Beverly in tow. Data finds the final log entry that Picard made and reads it back, making Picard all nostalgic for the good old days of being forced to abandon his ship, so tells Data to download the ship's logs and then goes to his old quarters to see if he can find any cool stuff he left behind. As he's sifting through some old books, the camera focuses on a big blue chest and a strange spherical object starts glowing red, causing Picard to double over in pain. But then we cut to Bok's ship and he has what looks like an identical device which he's clearly manipulating and begins to taunt Picard with glee. With the Stargazer now fully in their possession and under tow, Picard updates Riker on how he's feeling about the whole thing, before telling him to take over so he can take a much needed rest. As he tries to take a nap though, all he can hear are the sounds of that last battle echoing in his head. Meanwhile, Data has finished going through the Stargazer logs and has found something troubling. It appears the logs show a different version of events than the one Picard earlier described, and that it was apparently Picard who fired first and without provocation. Riker doesn't buy it though and demands further investigations, but he knows he must report this to Starfleet, which will risk Picard losing command of the Enterprise. He goes to inform Picard, which makes his headache even worse, and know they've only got a couple of days to find out the truth before Starfleet gets back to them. So Riker calls up Kazargo to try and find out why Bok is being so generous, even after the apparent logs that show Picard was fully to blame for the battle. Kazargo though is an idiot and we need to drag out the plot a bit longer before we really find out what's going on, so he hangs up on Riker. As Bok continues to manipulate the strange sphere device and laugh maniacally, Dr. Beverly makes another house call on Picard and chastises him for working when he should be resting. His headaches are really starting to become debilitating now, and Crusher suggests maybe it's just all the stress of seeing his old ship and the memories it brought up. He points out though that he got the headache long before he knew of the ship, but accepts that maybe it's not helping the situation, and now he's worried that he's just going crazy as he keeps hearing voices and reliving the battle. With no remedy in sight, Crusher decides to give him a sleeping aid and puts him to bed whilst putting some devices on his head to monitor his status remotely. But it seems like he still can't get a decent night's rest and is once again hearing shit in his head, whilst Spock continues to do his best Dr. Evil laugh before cranking up the dial on his device. Suddenly Picard starts to hallucinate and sees his old crew, so starts giving orders as if he's completely reliving the battle, and it's clear now that he's totally lost the plot. In the ready room, Data confirms that the Stargazer's logs were indeed altered as suspected, when Picard walks in apparently all jaunty and refreshed from his terrible night's sleep, so they're updating on what they've learned about the forged logs. Dr. Beverly then arrives, and is a bit shocked that Picard is up and about and wanted to talk to Riker about some strange readings she took, but Picard doesn't seem interested in what she has to say and orders everyone but Riker out. He tells Riker that he wants the Stargazer released from the tractor beam, which puzzles him, but does as he's ordered, and once again nobody seems too bothered by the captain's now odd behaviour after clearly being under a lot of stress for most of the episode. In sickbay, Dr. Beverly is showing Troy the odd readings she took from Picard's brain, when Wesley pops in and says, "Hey guys, I just figured out what was going on when I was casually glancing at some stuff, and the readings, they're identical from the Ferengi ship, and hey, you're welcome, you dumbass adults." Now I understand why everyone hates this little shit sometimes. Troy and Dr. Beverly quickly head to the bridge and inform Riker of this new development, and when he tries to check on Picard's location, the computer tells him he's in the transporter room, but before they can stop him, Picard beams out to the Stargazer. Once on board, he finds Bok on the bridge with him holding the strange sphere device. He cranks the dial up on the device again, and Bok informs him that he's collecting on an old debt, because it turns out that it was his son that was in charge of the ship that Picard destroyed all those years ago, and that this whole situation was orchestrated to get some good old-fashioned revenge. Picard is clearly under the full influence of the device now, and Bok tells him that he's back in command of the Stargazer and that the computer will obey his orders, and then beams off the ship to leave Picard to his fate. Back on the Enterprise, the crew have finally figured out that there was some device manipulating the captain, and Riker is desperately trying to call Picard on the Stargazer but gets no response, so he tries calling the Ferengi again and gets Kazago on the line. He demands to know what the device is, and Kazago explains it's a forbidden device called a Thought Maker before wondering how Riker got his hands on one. Riker says he knows that Bok is the one who controls them, and Kazago seems reluctant to challenge Bok when Yar says she's finally got Picard on the line. Switching quickly, Riker tries to convince Picard to come back, but he's fully reliving the past right now with his imaginary crew, and thinks the Enterprise is the enemy ship from the battle 9 years ago. Riker realises he's about to be on the receiving end of the Picard manoeuvre and demands Data quickly find some way to defend against it. As he thinks on it, Kazago calls Riker back and tells them they don't want to get involved, but that he's relieved Bok of command for pursuing an unprofitable venture, so that's him quickly dealt with. Data reports he has a solution, that all they really need to do is use the tractor beam to grab the Stargazer once it jumps. So Riker makes it so, and it all seems a little too easy to stop this legendary move, but they successfully stop Picard from blowing them all up. Once caught, Riker tries to call Picard again and manages to convince him that instead of blowing them up, he needs to blow up the sphere device sitting on his bridge. So, with no regard for his own safety, Picard walks up to it and fires his phaser at point blank range, causing it to explode and knock him off his feet. Yeah, I never expected that to happen when you blow up a high energy device in your face. With the device out of commission, Picard regains control of himself and beams back to the ship, and the episode then just ends abruptly. Well, after 2 awful episodes, we finally get something that's coherent, relatively well written, well acted, and well directed. The battle is definitely the best episode of season 1 to date, with the crew really starting to feel now like they're coming together and the actors getting to grip with their characters. We've got an interesting mystery. The Ferengi are considerably toned down in silliness since their initial disastrous debut in The Last Outpost, and we get some nice backstory into Picard's previous history as a Starfleet captain. Though it does get ruined somewhat by Wesley being the one to very casually save the day, thus making the adults look stupid again. But I'll cover that a bit later. Before I go on though, I want to digress a little into some behind the scenes stuff. It's been no secret that thus far, season 1 of TNG has been, well, a little on the shit side. Aside from Encounter at Farpoint and Where No One Has Gone Before, all the other episodes are generally varying degrees of awful. There's actually a myriad of reasons behind why season 1 is such an uneven mishmash of episodes, but most of it is down to a lot of behind the scenes shenanigans. If you've never seen the documentary Chaos on the Bridge, then I highly recommend it. It gives a great insight into what went on in those early days of TNG, focusing on Gene Roddenberry struggling to keep creative control of the series he gave birth to, and how he used his trusted lifelong attorney Leonard Maisledge to keep that control. This guy was constantly interfering with the writers, like rewriting their scripts and going through their desks at night and basically creating a hellish working environment for them. Season 2 also had its share of problems for other reasons as well as this, and the documentary also addresses this. It's why many fans generally regard Season 3 onwards as being when TNG really started hitting its stride and emerging from the shadows of the original series with many of its greatest episodes, and becoming the show we all know and love today. I only wanted to touch on this because I feel it's important to get some of this background info, and it's quite fascinating really to see what creative problems TNG had as a series before finally becoming a great show. Anyway, let's get on with the review. Unlike their disastrous first introduction, the Ferengi here are portrayed in a far less ridiculous, over-the-top way, helped considerably by Frank Corsentino's performance as Damon Bock. Although his subordinates are retaining some of the silly distracting movements, it's toned down considerably and not as overtly distracting as last time. Bock himself comes off as a far more engaging and interesting character, certainly the most interesting antagonist we've had since we were introduced to Q in the pilot, even if his motivations are pretty simple. In fact, I'd say it's his un-Ferengi-like behaviour that makes him so much more interesting, and how that actually ends up being his undoing because of his desire for revenge over profit. His second-in-command Kazago by comparison feels much more like how the Ferengi were initially depicted, being generally more stupid and annoying, and as such is a very forgettable character, though I don't think that's helped by the prosthetic teeth the actors have to wear, which distorts their voice considerably. Patrick Stewart also shines in this episode, with the focus being squarely on Picard. It was great to finally get some backstory on him, and though it doesn't go into too much detail, it does help to flesh out his character and add some more depth and complexity to him. His gradual deterioration as the episode progresses is well done, starting with the ever-growing headaches and how it's causing him to be distracted at sometimes key moments. There's a good scene where he's explaining in the conference room what originally happened with the Stargazer, and for just a moment just slips fluidly into delusion before coming back to reality. The scenes where he's talking to his imaginary crew in his quarters and then later on in the Stargazer bridge is also really well done, with the camera and lighting being used in good ways to really help sell to us his mental state as reality blurs with his past. He also gets a great character building scene with Dr. Crusher as he opens up to her about his mental state, and she's just quietly sitting there listening and supporting him. I mentioned in my last review how I thought Gates McFadden wasn't very good with scenes that required her to be forceful or some other kind of melodrama. However, here I think she does show her strength as an actress with her quiet prodding and support of Picard, and it felt to me like it was the first real genuine moment of friendship between these two characters that until this point had often been forced together in situations that didn't quite feel as well earned. Also, as a side note, this is the first time we see the captain's quarters, though that pillow on his bed doesn't look all that comfortable to me. Riker also gets a couple of good moments too, getting off a good joke at Data's expense early on, and then later quickly thinking on his feet as he has to defeat his captain's own legendary Picard maneuver. Though the maneuver itself is not exactly Admiral Adama dropping a Battlestar in the atmosphere level of awesome, but whatever, it's 80s TNG special effects, so, I can live with that. It's also not the real Picard maneuver that we will only come to know and love once they update the uniforms in Season 3. Anyway, he's also smart in keeping in touch with Kazago, first officer to first officer, trying to get to the bottom of what's going on and helping to undermine Bock's plans in the end. Troy too was also reasonably well used, with her feeling Picard's discomfort and confusion and being bewildered about what's going on, but trying her best to try and help him and find out, albeit unsuccessfully. As for Worf and Yar though, once again both are underused and pretty much invisible throughout this episode. It's really nice to actually be able to heap some praise on an episode finally instead of the previous shite we've had to go through. Anyway, it's not without its faults, and really there's only one major fault here, and it is of course Wesley Crusher. So far I've been pretty kind to him, much kinder than I generally expected to be with the exception of the Naked Now episode. However, this time the way he's used here is just downright annoying, making the adults look stupid because he basically just turns up twice in the episode to say, oh hey look, I figured it all out, and here by the way you're all stupid. And it's so annoying. Yeah, I get it already, he's a wonder child genius, but you don't have to show it to us by making everyone else look too dumb to do their jobs, and even if you do, it can be offset by character flaws that show he's not the equivalent of a Mary Sue type character. This is why Wesley as a character ended up irritating so many people rather than ever endearing us to him, and Will Wheaton himself has said that he feels that this episode is what really helped to define this overall negative view of Wesley. And it's a real shame because, as I've stated before, I think Wheaton did the best job he could at the time, and it was more the writing that really let him down. The only other things I didn't like too much was how I felt the episode just ended too abruptly with no real aftermath or discussion of what just happened. I mean, I would have liked to have seen a bit more of Bok and the aftermath of his failed attempt, but instead we just get a quick message about how he's been relieved of command and, well, that's that. Also, we don't really get much of an explanation about the MacGuffin sphere that Bok was using to influence Picard. You could argue that it was probably just as well we didn't get a wall of technobabble about how it worked, but the episode never even tries to explain how the device affects Picard specifically and no one else beyond a quick reference to it being a thought maker, and it just bothered me a little. But whatever, after everything that we've watched up until this point in the series, I'll take any good episodes I can get right now. So overall, an almost solidly good episode of TNG finally. Still not great, but certainly far above the quality of the previous 7 episodes overall. Next time we see the return of Q, where he makes an intriguing offer to Riker in the episode Hiding Q. Do feel free to leave any comments or feedback, and if you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe and share. Until next time, this has been Jay Warden, live long and prosper.